How's everyone doing? Welcome to the Strategy Room. You are here with the banker next door, Dr. Joe Berquist, your host for this evening on this Saturday night, January 24th, 2026. I hope everyone is having a great night out there. I did kind of have to laugh a little bit before I came on this evening because my wife had actually said to me, she goes, look, we're all preparing across the East Coast at least for this giant massive snowstorm that's about to hit us, and there's no football games or anything on tonight. So she said you might have a captive audience tonight. You know, they're trapped. They can't get out. They can't go anywhere. I thought that was kind of funny. So yeah, hoping to have a few people on here enjoying a lot of really good news here tonight with everybody on the show. So what do we have tonight? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about the Fed race. We're going to talk about, obviously, the World Economic Forum and Davos, big event that happens every year. That was the big happening for this week. Obviously, Donald Trump dropping a lot of bombs over there on Davos, which was, quite fascinating to watch. But we've got a Federal Reserve race going on. We have a Supreme Court decision with the federal with Lisa Cook, one of the Fed governors, and we're gonna have to see what's going on with that. We've got interest rate updates. I've got economic number updates coming to you. I've got an update on private credit that we're going to talk about later on. We're also going to talk a little bit about the president signed an executive order this week to ban Wall Street firms like BlackRock from being able to buy single-family homes. The president also backtracked on last week. I had reported on the president's 401k proposal to allow people to use their savings in their 401k to basically use that as a down payment to buy a house. Now he's basically backtracking on that. Could be a couple of reasons for that. We'll get into all that. We're going to talk a little bit about Ford and GM getting approved, or at least conditional approval, for ILC bank charters. So we're going to talk a little bit about that going on. I've got some other banking news. I'm going to get you guys an update on gold and silver a little bit later as we go on. So obviously, jam-packed show here, a lot of great information as we go on here. So we will kick it off as we normally do, right here with the U.S. debt clock. So the U.S. national debt now up to $38.650 trillion. U.S. federal spending is a little over $7 trillion. The U.S. federal budget deficit remains at $1.7 trillion. Tariff revenue up to $371 billion. That equates to $3,247 per taxpayer. Let's see here. What else do we have here? Defense war spending still at $927 billion. So almost $1 trillion there. Interest on the national debt, $987 billion, almost $1 trillion just on the interest on the national debt. Credit card debt still continues to hang up there at $1.3 trillion, with a per credit card balance, per credit card holder of $8,177 per credit card holder. So those are our numbers there as we normally look at here every week, and we'll come back to that periodically through the night as we get into some of the different stories that we get into. Now, let's take a look here real quick at rates. I always like to show everybody here what is going on with rates. So let's take a look at the 10-year. So the 10-year right now is hovering in here at 4.23%. Now, this has spiked up a little bit in the last couple of weeks. Not really what, like I said, we're really looking for a rate a little bit closer to 4%. And so this has gotten a little bit higher than what we would like it to be. That being said, mortgage rates still were pretty good for the last couple of weeks. Not really too crazy. So, and still hanging in kind of a lower sixes range. So, but let's go back for just a second here. I want to just say everybody, so we can see here, obviously the 30-year bond, the longer end of the yield curve, as we would call it, is still sitting at 4.830%. And then what else we got here? The 2-year note is at 3.605. That's actually dropped down just a little bit over the last day or so, but not too earth-shattering. So again, everything's still kind of holding with its band. Obviously, the 10-year note jumped a little bit because of what was going on at Davos very early in the week on Monday and Tuesday. Obviously, a lot of negotiations, a lot of back and forth about Greenland, threats of tariffs. So that caused a little shakiness in the market. The market kind of up and down for the week. I believe the market did end in negative territory for the week, but that those gyrations, if you will, basically caused the 10-year T-bill to kind of go up and down a little bit. But like I said, we kind of settled in here at 4.230%. And we're going to keep an eye on that here over the next couple of weeks and next month or so to see how that goes. So, all right, so let's jump into obviously the World Economic Forum. Big news of the week. So the World Economic Forum opens with a record leader turnout as Trump is set to attend Davos, and obviously what an attendance it was. And what were some of the big things here this week? So the Swiss Alpine town of Davos opened its doors to the World Economic Forum's 56th annual meeting on January 19th, with a steady stream of business and political leaders arriving for a week of closed-door talks and high-profile panel sessions set against a shifting global economic outlook and rising geopolitical strains. Organizers said this year's meeting, running through January 23rd, under the theme A Spirit of Dialogue, is among the most senior gatherings in the forum's history, featuring a record roster of political leaders alongside top executives and investors. The World Economic Forum said it expected a record 400 top political leaders, including close to 65 heads of state and government and 6 leaders from the Group of 7, as well as nearly 850 CEOs and chairs and close to 100 unicorns and technology pioneers. U.S. President Donald Trump is slated to take part, and organizers said the delegation for the United States will be the largest in Davos history. The WEF has framed this year's agenda around 5 broad challenges: cooperating in a contested world, unlocking new sources of growth, investing in people, deploying innovation responsibly, and building prosperity within planetary boundaries. Organizers have described the meeting as a platform for dialogue at a time of rising fragmentation, increasing complexity, and rapid technological change. Dialogue is not a luxury, it is a necessity, BND said, highlighting the forum's long-running argument that engagements across governments and industries is essential even as global rivalries sharpen. So, okay. Couple of big things with Davos this year. Obviously, Klaus Schwab, the longtime leader, and I don't know, whatever his thing was, if you want to call him director, executive director, CEO, whatever it was, his title was, Klaus has hit the bricks, as they said. He was basically forced out last year, and now Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, is now in there as the chairman, CEO, whatever, of the WEF. Larry Fink's got problems. Larry Fink is not a super popular guy outside of perhaps his Wall Street crowd that he hangs out with. And Larry has said a lot of suspect and highly questionable things at Davos over the last 10 or so odd years. And I think he stepped in it more than a few times. And obviously some of his clips have been viral clips. A lot of memes have been made out of the clips and things that he said. Now, this year, I felt like he really toned it down. And he really approached things more from, I felt like, a more practical standpoint. It wasn't kind of the typical talk down to you type of language that he has usually used in the past. No, this year the tone was much, much different at Davos. This year's tone was more, how would you say, definitely a more somber tone. The whole climate issue, I'm going to say it that way, I'm going to describe it as the climate issue, has basically fallen apart. And I think everyone over there, especially in the European market, has basically come to the realization that, the whole climate change was, it didn't work. It was a lot of faulty science. It was a lot of nonsense. Basically, everyone around the world has now woken up to that. And the fact that, if we're going to push AI, we're going to need more energy. And unfortunately, solar panel and wind farms are not going to get that done. We need to go back to the good old fashioned stuff. We're going to need to go back to nuclear power. We're going to need to go back to coal. We're going to need to go back to the good old fashioned stuff that we have always been able to rely on for the last 100+ years. And that's what we're going to need to do. And we're really going to need to build that out. And that was basically a theme amongst a lot of CEOs, a lot of people that spoke there. I think one of the most interesting talks was Ken Griffith from Citadel. Now, for people who don't know, Citadel is one of the largest hedge funds in the world, not if not the U.S. They just built a massive new headquarters down in Miami in Florida and moved there from Chicago. Ken Griffith basically talked about how he was incredibly frustrated with the Biden administration, about how he felt like they were just constantly making bad decisions left and right. And he felt like every day was just another just wild decision. Basically, them putting out solutions to problems that didn't exist. And I thought that was very interesting and very telling. I don't know why he didn't say that while Biden was president. It would have been, I think that would have been I think it would have been good for him to stand up and say something while Biden was president. But okay, so be it. But he kind of spoke his piece, and I think he was right in what he said. I think he was absolutely right in what he said. I think that that was what a lot of what went on in the Biden administration. So, but then obviously we get to Trump, and Trump came in and basically took a sledgehammer to globalization, and basically just said, hey, these days, the days of globalization are basically over, basically done. We're gonna put America first. We are going to focus on America's economic agenda. And again, not that we don't have friends and allies around the world, but we're entering into a new era now where we tried globalization. We tried outsourcing all of our jobs to everybody else around the world, and while that may have helped a lot of other people, it didn't help America. It did not help the heartland of America. Let's say it that way. So very interesting talks, and it was very funny. The whole Greenland thing really blew up, and obviously people were saying, "Oh, the stock market's melting down." And I thought Scott Bessent earlier in the week had some really good comments about what was going on with the overall economy, especially at the beginning of the week, just basically saying that, hey, look, what's going on with the market didn't really have anything to do with Greenland. It had more to do with Japan and Japan's bond market and what was going on there. And I thought that was spot on. I thought, yeah, absolutely. There's some issues going on with Japan right now with their debt, with their bond market, with their interest rates, what their central bank is doing. And that is definitely causing issues for us because Japan is one of the largest purchasers of U.S. debt. So obviously if Japan's got a problem, stops buying our debt, maybe even starts selling our debt, that could obviously cause us a lot of problems, and that's going to make it more difficult for us to basically try to keep control of interest rates and try to keep interest rates going down. So obviously that was, but the Greenland issue was again another almost almost like comical issue, because we have seen this theme from Europe, and it started with a lot of the tariffs, and this is why when I talked a lot about the tariff stuff last year, it was almost comical because the certain European countries like France, Germany, UK, they would come out and it would be all this tough talk, oh, Trump's not going to do anything to us. He can't do anything. He's not getting one over on us. There's no way he's going to raise our tariffs. And then, and they would say, oh, we're going to hit back and we're going to hit them with tariffs and this, everything. And when you look at it, when you actually understand the situation and you understand that they need us, we don't need them. That's first. And then secondly, you realize that they're tariffing us. They're tariffing the U.S. And they have been for decades, and yet it's the U.S. that didn't tariff them. So you realize that this is just becoming, not that Trump was massively getting one over on them, but it was just becoming a more level playing field. It was becoming more tit for tat, and it was basically like, hey, you don't tariff us and we won't tariff you. And of course, they weren't going to take their tariffs off. So we said, okay, that's fine. We're going to put our tariffs on. And of course, Of course, they caved immediately and said, "Oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. If you want to hit us with 10%, and we'll hit you with 10%, and that's cool. That's cool. That's good. That works for us, you know." And so all the bluster, all the bravado, all the talking, basically went nowhere at the end of the day because they didn't have a they didn't have a winning hand. And now you get to Greenland, and Greenland is very, very important for the strategic defense of the United States. It has been for a very long time. It is apparent now with the trade routes that potentially could run through there. And obviously, Russia and China both eyeing it up that something had to be done there. The U.S. is going to have to step in there and in a certain fashion. And I'm not saying that we're going to like take over Greenland and I don't think Greenland is going to become part of the U.S. per se. It's not like going to be like Alaska or something like that. But um, will we have a certain dominion over Greenland? Yes, I think we will at the end of the day, and I think will we have a larger um, military presence there? Yes, I think we're going to have a larger military presence there. Is there going to be perhaps different trading ports built there? Yes, I think there will be. So again, I think it will ultimately end up a very positive thing. But again, Europe, Germany sending soldiers to Greenland. I mean, it's kind of a joke. I mean, they sent like 15 or 20 soldiers. I mean, come on, man. And then when they sent them back home, they couldn't even send them back on a military plane. They all had to fly coach going back home. I mean, how pathetic is that? But I mean, again, it's just it's a joke. It's like come on, man. It's like guys, did you not see what we just did to Venezuela? Did you not see that? Like, not that we're doing that to you. We don't need to go get Macron. Macron's he's getting beat up by his wife every day. So we don't need to send anybody to go get Macron. He's got to show up with his aviators to hide his black eyes that he he gets for his wife. But anyway, I digress. I know that's mean. It's so mean. How could you? How could you? Where's Greta Thunberg when we need her? How could you? All right, but that was basically Davos this week. It was a lot of the world. Trump went over there and basically rained on their parade. Told them that globalization was dead and that U.S. was going to continue to flex its muscles in dominating our hemisphere. And of course, they didn't like that too much. He told them that he was there. We're pulling out of the WHO, and they cried over that a little bit. And it's all this. Oh, resist. I just don't understand. At the end of the day, I have never understood. They're just obsessed. They're just this obsession that comes out of this group and these global elites of just this dominion over the world. Like they are as Tom Wolfe famously put it, they are the masters of the universe. And I just don't get it. Like, hey, how about, here's a novel idea. How about you just worry about your country and stop trying to tell the rest of the world how to live? Like there's an idea for you. And again, and they always frame these things as like, oh, well, this is an exchange of ideas. And like, really? Is it really an exchange of ideas? Because all I ever see is a whole bunch of these people show up together on their private jets, fly in, they get out, they all parrot the exact same talking points. So there's no dialogue there, and they don't allow, in years past, they never allowed anybody of real substance to get up there with a different point of view or speak. And if they did, they were shouted down, or maybe they were given one little minor speaking junket at the very end of the tour on the last day, buried in the back room. But they have to give Trump an audience because he's the president of the United States. Like they have to give him an audience. They have to let him get up there and speak. And so again, it makes a very different dynamic. But again, it's a very interesting thing. The Davos crowd and Davos, man, I did have to laugh. Like, you notice, everybody might notice I'm wearing my vest here tonight, right? Like, one of the things that I always laugh at every year. It is absurd. And I don't know how they do it with a straight face. CNBC and even Bloomberg, CNBC and Bloomberg, I love how they have the guys sitting outside there. Now, I want you to keep this in perspective. They're in like the lap of luxury in the Swiss Alps. Okay, they're at like the Four Seasons Hotel. Okay, the finest, one of the probably finest places in the world you could stay at, and they're all there, and they put them outside like on the balcony. They set their stage up to make it look like, oh, we're roughing it. We're out here freezing in the cold, and oh, but look at we're roughing it here in Davos with the wealthiest people in the world. It's so ridiculous. And then the minute they step off the stage, there are 20 servants, I mean waiters, waiting to pamper them to know it. Oh, here's your hot chocolate. Oh, hold on. Here's do you need a foot warmer? Perhaps a foot massage. Like, do you need something? It's so ridiculous. But I love it. I just love laughing at them every year when they come on, because I know it's coming. I'm like, oh, here's the scene of them out on the deck. They're living hard life there in Davos. It's so cold. It's so cold. All right, that's enough of my diatribe there. So, all right, I saw this and I thought this was really interesting. So, Trump's first year by the numbers. So, Trump's policies have influenced everything from economic growth and stock market performance to gas prices and mortgage rates. So, let's just take a look at a couple things here real quick. So, stock market performance, pretty good. NASDAQ's up almost 20%. S&P's up 15.7%. Dow Jones up 13.5%. So, pretty good there. Economic growth, down negative in the first quarter, but 3.8% in the second quarter, 4.3% in the third. And now we have an estimated a whopping 5.3 here in the fourth quarter, potentially. That's what we're looking at right here. That number probably will hold. But again, I mean, just economic growth. I mean, phenomenal economic growth in the first year. You got to love seeing that. Inflation, again, not down as much as what we would like, but not doing too bad. I mean, you look at where inflation was during the Biden years, and not doing too bad at all. Still have some work to do there, absolutely. But I mean, we're sitting here, inflation slowed to 2.7% by November and December, largely due to falling gas prices. Yes, true, but other things are falling. I'll show that to you guys a little later. We're going to look at a Trueflation chart, see what you guys think about that. But inflation holding in check. Trade looking great. The trade deficit here, I mean, look at where we were in just the first couple months, first quarter of the year, down 136 billion. Down there, 120 billion, 129 billion. And now, and keep in mind, those are pretty normal months for the last, umpteen years. But then you see they begin to go down. And now, as of October, we're down to 29 billion. Trade deficit fell to 29 billion in October, the lowest level in 16 years. 16 years. Like, that is phenomenal. Total tariffs collected. Fiscal year 2024, 77 billion collected, and then fiscal year 2025, upwards of $195 billion in tariffs collected. I think that number is probably probably higher than that, but okay, we'll take it for the moment. But the point is that everything is trending the way that you want to do it. I mean, we've shrunk the trade deficit. We have got tariff revenues rolling in. Unemployment was looking really good for a little while there, but now has hit a little bit of the skids. So, but let's just look at something here. So, I want to focus in. I think this is very key to focus in on this native-born employment. Native-born, meaning American citizens. So you can see there, we got to, as of January 2025, 130,000 jobs. And then we got up to here by November, we were up to 133,000, but then we fell off a little bit in December to 132,000, but still a much better year for native-born employees, American citizens, than there have been in the last few years. Job growth by our monthly job growth here. Yeah, you can see October, not a great month, but then a little bit of a bounce back in November and December. But again, I really want to stress, The layoffs that you're seeing in the job market are federal layoffs. It's government jobs that are being reduced. It's not other jobs. You're not seeing like massive reductions in like banking and construction and hospitality and healthcare. You're not seeing that at all. They're fine. Like they may not be growing like gangbusters. They may not be hiring like gangbusters, but they're fine. They're trugging along and they're doing okay. The main reduction is in government jobs. So, and then you can see the unemployment rate still hovering in, still good, 4.4%. I find it interesting that people on the news don't really talk about the fact that it used to be, and I'll say it this way, it's always interesting with talking points, right? Talking points on the news from people. In other words, if you had a certain president in the White House and say unemployment was 5.2% or 5.1%, the narrative would be, oh, well, hey, 5% is considered normal. That's considered normal unemployment. Okay. If you're at 5%, if you're hovering around 5%, that's fine. That means everything is fine. Trump has been basically between 4.3 and 4.5%. He's been kind of hovering in that bandwidth all year, just about all year long. And it's like, oh my gosh, the job market's going into the toilet. It's terrible. Oh my gosh. Again, we're still below normal. Like normal unemployment is 5%, but yet we are still hovering below that. So I just like to point that out. Just to keep that in mind. Gas prices down 8.68%. That's fantastic. Oil prices down 25.36%. Mortgage rates on the 30-year fixed rate mortgage temporarily fall below 6% for the first time in more than 3 years. So mortgage rates definitely heading in the right direction. Border security, of course, absolutely fantastic. 0% releases for 8 consecutive months from May to November, 93% reduction in border crossings year over year. 1.9 million illegal aliens have self-deported and 622,000 illegal aliens have been deported. You can see nationwide encounters, nationwide apprehensions, just way, way down. So yes, I give those excellent markings. So there we got that. Executive actions. So and this you just have to. This is an eye popping. So Trump puts out 227 executive orders, and he's had 559 legal challenges to his Trump executive actions. Now that you might sit there and say, well, that's interesting. That seems like a lot. Well, you would be correct. That is a ridiculous amount when you compare the number of legal actions against him versus the last, 5 or 6 presidents. It's not even close. So, but again, I'm not gonna get into all the politics of all that. But I just want to point out that so far, so good. Again, I don't think anybody looking at this can sit there and say that this man is not doing a good job and has not done a great job in his first year and is not a million times better than anything Joe Biden did for the 4 years. And I make no bones about it. I think Joe Biden is literally the worst president that this country ever had, and I don't think it's close. And we've had some bad ones. For sure we have had some bad ones. But yeah, I don't think. I think he was the worst president. I do think that time will bear that out. I think you give it. You go 20, 30 years from now and you look back on his presidency, I don't think there's going to be any doubt that people are going to be like, woof, that was a doozy. All right, now let's get into some Fed news here. So let's jump into the Fed chair race here for a few minutes. So earlier this week, Scott Bessent, he basically said that Trump's pick for the next Fed chair could happen next week. So we are waiting, the key date there being January 31st, because Stephen Mirren's his time on the board does expire on the 31st. I think there's some way that he could kind of hang out for a few more days or maybe another week or so beyond that. But his term officially ends on the 31st. So I believe that is probably, well, given that the 31st is a Saturday, the 30th is Friday. So my guess is probably on Friday, we will probably get Trump's pick or his announcement for who the Fed chair is going to be. But we'll see. But anyway, let's go into this. So I had predicted this last week. I think Rick Rieder is your guy, and I'm going to show you why in a second here. So obviously, and I think the tell was when Trump came out last week and basically said that, Rick Rieder was the last one to be interviewed of the top four picks that Biden had going. So he got the last interview, and then Trump came out, and then what happened? Trump basically told Kevin Hassett and basically said, hey, Kevin, who was the front runner, he basically told Kevin Hassett, hey, Kevin, I love you, but I think I want to keep you where you're at. I love the job that you're doing where you're at as the head economic advisor or whatever. He's like, you're doing a bang up job there. I want to keep you over there. And I think Rick Rieder is your guy. And like I said, we'll see what happens. But I just want to point this out. Let's go to Polymarket for just a second here. So now on Polymarket, what happened? Rick Rieder last week was hovering, I don't know, maybe around 10 or 15%. He is now in the lead, and he is now at 48% here on Polymarket. So, who will Trump nominate as the next Fed chair? And yeah, he has shot up to about a 50% chance here. And interestingly, Kevin Warsh, who obviously that's Wall Street's guy. That's the guy that Wall Street and I would say the political elite, the people inside the Fed, they would love nothing more to have Kevin Warsh go in there. For that reason alone, I do not want Kevin Warsh in there. I would roll the dice and say, hey, maybe Rick Rieder. My issue with Kevin Hassett, and I always said this, and anybody who's watched the live stream here over the last probably 6 months or whatever, I think that the person that you need is somebody who's gonna shake things up at the Fed a little bit. And what I mean by that is that I think that, and this goes back to the series the Lords of Easy Money series that I did. If anybody gets a chance, go check that out. It's a great series on all about the Fed and what they've done to the economy the last 15 years. I think that because of all that, because of that history, because of all the things that have gone in there, you need somebody who's going to shake things up a little bit. And now the people on CNBC and Bloomberg and the people in the Wall Street Journal, they will freak out. Okay, if Rick Rieder it's picked, they will freak out because they will go, oh, this is challenging the Fed's independence and this, that, and everything, whatever. And like, no. It really doesn't have to do with independence. It has to do with the Fed not making good choices and Jeremy Powell not doing a good job. That's it. Like he has not done a good job. Jeremy Powell has not done a good job. Janet Yellen did not do a good job as a chairman. Ben Bernanke did not do a good job as Fed chairman. They caused a lot of problems in our economy. With the ZIRP, the zero interest rate policy, the quantitative easing, the manipulations of the bond market, the manipulations of the repo market, like all the different things that they have done over the last 15 years. So we do need somebody who's different. We do need somebody to go in there and shake things up a little bit. My issue, getting back to Kevin Hassett for a second, all that being said, my issue with Kevin Hassett is that I just didn't think Kevin Hassett was that type of guy. I just didn't think he might want to do something like that, but I just didn't. Kevin Hassett just didn't strike me as the guy who was gonna go in there and like Roddy Piper from They Live. It's like I'm here to kick butt and chew bubblegum, and I'm all out of bubblegum. That's not Kevin Hassett. And I don't know. Maybe that's not Rick Rieder either. I don't know, but maybe it is though. I did see Rick on an interview that he did on CNBC last week, and he talked a lot about some of his experiences at BlackRock, where he had to go in and he had to kick some people in the butt, and he had to get things rolling. He had to shake things up a little bit, and that is the exact kind of stuff that I'm looking for, and that is exactly what I think that we need over at the Federal Reserve. So, but again, I think that Rick, and it's also very interesting because Rick is a Wall Street guy. He is a BlackRock guy. He's a Wall Street guy. And yet, to watch them having potential apprehension because he is viewed as an outsider, that could be very interesting. It definitely could make the Senate confirmation hearings to be must-see TV. So we will have to wait to see what happens. Now, Rick Reeder is not one of the current Fed governors. So Rick would have to be appointed to the Fed board, which again is why Stephen Mirren's spot is so important and why he comes up on January 31st. Or I should say his term expires there on January 31st. So because Rick could get put into his spot. So, but like I said, we'll see what happens there. But I think that this has been a really interesting turn of events here in just the last week and a half in the whole race for the next Fed chair. And obviously, Rick Reeder, obviously now the odds-on favorite. I do believe that he is going to be the pick now. I think whatever happened in that final interview, I think he must have wowed Trump and Bassett and some of the other people that were in the room there. So, so we'll see what happens. But I think we'll probably by Friday, we're probably going to get that announcement. So we'll see there. So, all right. Now, we had this whole drama this week with the Federal Reserve and Lisa Cook. Obviously, Trump wants to fire Lisa Cook because she committed mortgage fraud. She has resisted that. Jeremy Powell has said, no, the Trump doesn't have the authority to fire her. Now, I have basically thought that this was a lose-lose situation for the Fed because and I said this from the beginning on this matter. So, because first of all, a couple of years, let me back up for a second. A couple of years ago, you had two Fed governors that got caught doing insider trading. They got caught with their hands in the cookie jar. The Fed governor in Boston and the Fed governor down in Dallas. Now, before the investigations could kick off, they resigned, and they resigned right quick and stepped down and got out of Dodge. Jeremy Powell almost got in a little bit of trouble there, but he was able to kind of sidestep that, so to speak, right? But even the slightest appearance of impropriety on the part of the Fed governors in their trading and what was going on there, they took off. They resigned in a heartbeat. They were gone just like that. Because again, it's reputational risk, right? Like for the Fed, you can't have Fed governors up there looking like they're doing shady stuff, right? So, but I think more importantly, I think the reason why they stepped down was because they didn't want a broader investigation of what was going on in there at the Fed. Because my guess is that had they done a broader investigation, they would have found that a lot of people over there at the Fed were doing insider trading because they were not to be outdone by members of Congress. So, but of course, for the Fed to do it, it is illegal. Yes, it is illegal for the Fed to do it. They don't have the protections that people in Congress have, that the sitting members of the House and the Senate have. They do not have those protections. So it was very interesting here that Lisa Cook, who got caught red-handed, and they had the documents. They're like, here, yeah, she committed mortgage fraud. And the attitude of like, no, I'm not stepping down. I'm not stepping down. This is not going to happen. And Jeremy Powell jumping in. Oh, I'm not going to, Trump can't do this. He doesn't have the right to fire her. He's messing with Fed independence and all this other garbage, whatever. And I said, okay, so now this is going to the Supreme Court. And I said, this either way, this doesn't work out in their favor, because here's what's going to happen. If the Supreme Court shoots this down, and it's looking like it may, as we'll see here in a moment, if the Supreme Court shoots this down, right, what's going to happen is, again, I can guarantee this, well, the next thing that's going to happen is that Trump is going to come out, and he is going to make an argument, and he's going to say, listen, so it turns out, according to SCOTUS and the Fed, that I have no power over them. The president has no power over the Federal Reserve. And that is a very interesting thing. Is that truly constitutional? And, it doesn't, because it doesn't say anything in our Constitution about a central bank. It doesn't say anything. There's nothing, there's not one word written in our Constitution about a central bank. Nothing that says, oh, we must have a central bank and that central bank must have independence. And what does that mean to be independent? I think Scott Bessent had a great quote earlier in the week where he basically said that independence does not mean no oversight. Okay, independence does not equal no oversight. And I thought that that was yes, boom, hit the nail right on the head there. They can be, yes, they can be independent to a degree, but that does not mean that they are free of oversight. That doesn't mean that doesn't mean the American people don't get to show up and knock on their door every once in a while and say, hey, you know what? I think you need to be audited. Yeah, I think we need to know, and I think we need to ask deeper questions about what you're doing and how you're managing the economy and some of the bad steps that you've made. So I think that there is a lot there that needs to be discussed. And what I'm saying is that if the Supreme Court shoots this down, like I said, I will not be shocked if the next thing is Trump's going to turn around and he's going to say, yeah, hey, about that independence thing you guys keep yammering about. Yeah, we're going to go to court about that. We're going to challenge that, and we're going to have a bigger discussion on that. The House might need to reopen the Federal Reserve Act, and we might need to revise some of the things in that Federal Reserve Act. So, and again, they're going to have a whole lot of people saying yes, 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 yes. Like there's a whole group of people out there that have wanted to abolish the Fed for the last 50 years, and that group has only gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm not saying that that's what we need to do. I don't think we should do that. But what I'm saying is that that he is potentially opening up a can of worms that he doesn't want to open up. I think the smart thing to do from the beginning was that Jeremy Powell should have just asked Lisa Cook to step down. They could have sidestepped all of this. All he had to do was basically say, hey, Lisa, hey, sorry about this. Look, it just doesn't look good. Doesn't pass the smell test. You should probably just step down now and go away. Just like the other Fed governors did a few years before with the insider trading deal. She should have just stepped down and gone away. And this would, okay, so Trump would have appointed somebody on there. All right. There's still like, it wasn't going to affect the outcome of any voting. He still, Powell still had the votes. He could still do kind of what he wanted on there. So again, I just thought that this was a foolish thing from Jeremy Powell from the beginning. And again, but again, hey, they wanted to do it. They wanted to go down this road. So we ended up this week with this whole soap opera where basically it was like Supreme Court to hear arguments on, the Trump bid to fire Lisa Cook on January 21st. And then we had the Fed chief, Jeremy Powell, basically saying that he was going to attend the court arguments on the Trump bid to fire Lisa Cook. He wanted to be there in the crowd. He wanted to be there sitting front and center. I don't think, again, that's a good look. But of course, hey, Jeremy Powell, he's defiant, baby. He's gonna resist. He's the resistor. He's the chief resistor, right? And even Scott Bessent echoed these comments, basically saying that Powell attending the Supreme Court argument on Lisa Cook is a mistake. CNBC reported Monday, citing a person familiar with the matter, that Powell plans to be present at the oral arguments. I actually think that's a mistake, Bessent told CNBC's Joe Kiernan in an interview from the World Economic Forum in Davos. Now, Bessent basically said, if you're trying not to politicize the Fed, for the Fed chair to be sitting there trying to put his thumb on the scale, that's a mistake. Yes, absolutely. That absolutely. That's that. There it is, right there. Now, what ultimately happened here? Well, Fed Governor Lisa Cook seems safe from Trump firing after Supreme Court arguments. So, Fed Governor Lisa Cook seems safe from firing by President Trump after Supreme Court justices skeptically questioned the Trump administration's lawyers on Wednesday about the grounds for Cook's would-be termination and its effect on the Fed's historical independence. The case could have long-term effects on the Fed's independence in setting interest rates. The arguments come less than 2 weeks after Fed Chair Jeremy Powell disclosed he was under criminal investigation by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C. over the central bank's pricey building renovation projects. So And then we had this piece from Banking Dive. So Supreme Court approaches Cook case with skepticism. Liberal and conservative justices pressed lawyers on the cause and notice in President Donald Trump's attempted firing of the Fed governor, and consequences of setting a new precedent. So Supreme Court justices, liberal and conservative alike, largely expressed skepticism during oral arguments on Wednesday over President Donald Trump's attempt to fire Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook. One major point of contention in the 2-hour hearing is whether Trump gave Cook sufficient notice of her dismissal. The president demanded that Cook resign in an August 20th post on Truth Social, in which he linked to a story on a Justice Department probe into mortgage fraud allegations against the Fed governor. 5 days later, Trump posted a letter to social media saying he was firing Cook effective immediately. Solicitor General John Sauer, arguing for Trump, told the Supreme Court in September that the firing came after Cook declined to bring any defense to the president's attention or to dispute any material facts. She was supposed to post about it, and that was the opportunity for it to be heard. And you're saying was afforded to her in the case. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, a Democratic appointee, asked Sauer on Wednesday. Justice Amy Coney Barrett, a Republican appointee, asked why Trump didn't offer Cook a hearing, saying it wouldn't be that big a deal to lay out the alleged evidence and hear her response. If there isn't anything to hear from a hearing, and if you have the evidence, why couldn't those resources have put into the hearing? She asked Sauer. Cook's lawyer, Paul Clement, did not argue Wednesday whether a social post amounted to notice, rather calling the Trump administration's process fundamentally defective notice because it showed indisputable evidence that the president prejudged the matter. Justice Samuel Alito, a Republican appointee, asked Clement what due process would look like for Cook, whose removal must meet a for-cause standard, but for whom no appeals process is mentioned in the Federal Reserve Act. So again, I think what is happening here ultimately is that SCOTUS might be looking for, again, SCOTUS sometimes gets very antsy about some of the things, some of these court cases. Like this is one of those hot potatoes that they really don't want to get in the middle of, because what they're ultimately determining here is whether the president has power over the federal, a certain extent of power over the Federal Reserve. Like, in other words, if the president deems that somebody on the Federal Reserve has done something wrong or illegal, does the president have the right to remove that Fed governor? I believe that, yes, the president should have the ability to remove somebody if they have been found to do something like what she has been found to be, accused of. And, so that, but the court obviously doesn't want that hot potato. They don't want to jump in the middle of this thing. So I think they're obviously looking for that escape clause. That's why they're jumping in with the due process. Oh, was she given due process? Was she not given due process? Blah, blah, blah. So they could come out here with some kind of a mixed ruling, basically saying something to the effect of like, yeah, the president does have the right to fire her, but he didn't give her due process, or he didn't do X, Y, and Z. Therefore, we wouldn't allow him to fire her in this instance, but it could open the door to him coming back and firing her, provided he gives, proper notice or due diligence, or, gives her a proper time frame, whatever. So, we'll have to see but the one thing that is clear also in this is that the Supreme Court's they're not in a rush to come back on any kind of decision here. They're going to take their time. They're not looking to rush back here in the next few days, or maybe even the next few weeks. It might still end up being a couple of months before we hear from the Supreme Court on this issue. So, we shall see what ultimately happens with this. But again, like I said, just to sum up, I think this was very foolish on the part of Jeremy Powell and on Lisa Cook, because I think no matter how this ends up, it's going to blow up in the face of the Federal Reserve. I really believe that. Like even if the Supreme Court gives them a favorable ruling, it's still not going to save her at the end of the day. It's not. Jeremy Powell's gone here in May. And so again, and again, and if the Supreme Court ruling does not go in its favor, you're just going to see Trump shift and go to a different attack, one that could be far more impactful on the Fed as an institution. So, but we'll see. We'll see what happens there. All right. Now, here's another piece, and I promise this is my last piece of SCOTUS news here tonight. Supreme Court unlikely to overturn Trump tariffs, his signature economic policy, according to Scott Bessent. So Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said it's unlikely the Supreme Court will overturn President Donald Trump's tariffs imposed under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. The top court could decide on the legality of Trump's use of the IEEPA to impose tariffs as soon as this week. I believe that it is very unlikely that the Supreme Court will overturn a president's signature economic policy. So, yes, I argued at the beginning that, again, forget Trump for the moment. Think about any other president that's in the Oval Office. And because, again, this was not about Trump. This is about the presidency. It's about the office, the presidency. Every president has to have the ability to levy tariffs to a certain extent. And again, yes, you can make the argument to say that, Congress has the power or whatever to levy, but Congress moves very slow. The wheels turn very slow in Congress. It can be very difficult to get things through. And in the meantime, the country could be getting beat up on something pretty bad, or certain industries could be getting beat up pretty bad. I think the president has to have the ability to be able to negotiate with all countries around the world. And one of the most powerful tools, if not the most powerful tool he has at his disposal, is tariffs. He can negotiate through tariffs. Tariffs are a negotiation tactic. And that's a reality for any president. And this country has a long history of tariffs. Yes, we haven't used tariffs a lot in the last 30 or 40 years, but in the first, 200 years of our history of this country's existence, we used tariffs a lot. And tariffs brought in the bulk of the revenue into this country for well over a century. So again, I think given the history, given the office, like you can't deny the president his ability to be able to use tariffs as a negotiation tactic, as leverage to be able to set that. Now, hey, look, I think that Congress at some point somewhere should have their say. They should be able to maybe codify or change things up down the road if they see things a little bit differently than the president does. Again, checks and balances. But you can't. I think that would be a horrible, horrible thing for this country if they take that power away from the president. And I think ultimately that is what they seem very skeptical when they went in there at first in their arguments. But I think after perhaps thinking about it, perhaps considering the larger picture, I think they probably came around to basically say, yeah, we can't strip the president of this. The president has to be able to do this. And that's not a Trump thing. That's a presidency thing. Okay. Enough on that. We'll see what happens with that. Okay. TikTok. The U.S. deal was finalized. So what do we need to know? So these are the new owners of TikTok, the USDS joint venture. So a couple things to run through here. So who runs and owns TikTok now? Well, the deal creates a 7-member board of directors to govern the joint venture, according to the January 22nd deal announcement. The directors include TikTok CEO Shou Chu, Timothy Dattels, a senior advisor at asset manager TPG Global, where he previously chaired the Asian division and was a member of the executive committee, Mark Dooley, managing director at trading giant Susquehanna International Group, Egon Durbin, co-CEO of private equity firm Silver Lake, and Oracle executive Kenneth Gluck, who heads the tech giant's global corporate affairs and communications and advises the CEO on global strategy and policy. The two other board members are Raul Fernandez, who will serve as independent director and chair of the joint ventures security committee, and David Scott, who will also serve on the security committee. Fernandez is the president and CEO of IT consultancy DXC Technology, and Scott is the chief strategy and safety officer at tech investment firm MGX. The board appointed Adam Presser as CEO of the TikTok USD joint venture, and Will Ferrell as chief security officer. Presser previously served as TikTok's global head of operations and trust and safety, and as an executive in Warner Media, including heading its China division. All right, so why does the U.S. need to own TikTok? Well, Congress passed a law in 2024 requiring app owners who are controlled by foreign adversaries to sever that connection in order to operate in the United States, signaling out ByteDance's ownership of TikTok. So ByteDance has argued it was not controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. yeah, okay. And sought for years to convince the U.S. government to accept an alternative to divestment. Still, U.S. officials had said that because the Chinese regime has enacted laws to require all entities operating in China to assist with the regime's data and intelligence collection on demand, a Chinese-based entity such as ByteDance cannot reasonably make security guarantees. Will the app change? So White House officials have said there will be no interruption to service. The purpose of the joint venture is to adhere to national security mandates as set out in the 2024 law, and the new group will be responsible for creating safeguards for U.S. users. Proponents of divestment had raised concerns about content in addition to data security and management of TikTok's famously addictive, infamously opaque algorithm. Had been a sticking point in the deal. Researchers had found that the app tends to suppress content critical of the CCP's human rights abuses, for example, raising concerns that other forms of content manipulation could occur and be difficult to detect. The joint venture will be responsible for training, testing, and updating the algorithm, which is to be secured by Oracle. Oracle will serve as the venture's trusted security partner and will also play a part in the ongoing review of the app's source code. TikTok also faces several lawsuits related to harm to minors, with plaintiffs arguing the app targets younger users with disproportionately negative content, to which the app has responded that it implements content moderation and safeguards. The new joint venture will also have decision-making authority for trust and safety policies and content moderation, according to the January 22nd deal announcement. Officials have highlighted that the deal will require Oracle to secure U.S. data on U.S. soil, but this has been TikTok's practice even under ByteDance ownership. Cybersecurity experts who advised the lawmakers and officials had pointed out that storage of data in a specific location does not preclude access to that data during transfer. However, the joint venture will create a data privacy and cybersecurity program to be audited and certified by third-party security experts, a move that ByteDance had previously proposed as an alternative to divestment. So, what do we have here with this at the end of the day? I think, unfortunately, that TikTok has now been turned into like a bastard child. This is not, I don't think, going to work out the way that they maybe envision that it is. I don't know, this weird board that they've put together, and Oracle's going to manage the algorithm and store the data, but are they really going to change the algorithm? And because obviously there's things there that need to change, but TikTok is so big. It's so big, and it really does have so much influence now. And, and especially the Gen Z crowd. I mean, the Gen Z crowd would go nuts if you took their TikTok away from them. They would go nuts. So again, I think that the U.S. government, when I say they, I mean the U.S. government, they try to kind of come up with a middle of the road solution here, something that was going to work for everybody and still be okay at the end of the day. I don't know that this thing is going to really work out at the end of the day. We'll see what happens with this one. But all right, we'll keep an eye on that one. You know what? One of our good friends to the channel, Alex Blumstrom, who has done a number of interviews with me over the years. Last time she was on, she talked a lot about TikTok, how she uses TikTok for her business, and that was the whole point. That was the whole reason I wanted her on. was because I wanted her to do that. I wanted her to talk about, how she used TikTok and how TikTok plays a vital role in her business, and how she, the different revenue streams on TikTok for a small business owner and all that. So I like I said, I am sure that Alex will be making a return very soon to do an interview with me to talk about how things are going there with that so far. So, okay. All right, next up here, Trump sues JP Morgan and Jimmy Dimon over alleged debanking. The action makes good on plans the president made public last week when he accused the bank of incorrectly debanking him in connection with the January 6, 2021 U.S. Capitol riot. So President Donald Trump filed a $5 billion lawsuit Thursday against JP Morgan Chase and its CEO, Jamie Dimon, for alleged political debanking. Trump filed the complaint in Miami-Dade County State Court, accusing JP Morgan of trade libel and breach of implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing, court documents show. Trump also accused Dimon of violating Florida's Unfair and Deceptive Trade Practices Act. Debanking is a matter of public interest and significant importance to all consumers and businesses in the United States of America, and JPMC, especially given its storied and leading history, is a central actor in this ongoing and troubling saga, according to the complaint. Trump and several of his affiliate companies were JP Morgan customers for decades before the bank, without warning or remedy, told him on February 19, 2021 that several of his accounts would be closing 2 months later because JP Morgan unilaterally debanked plaintiffs. By terminating plaintiffs' accounts, plaintiffs suffered considerable financial harm and losses caused not only by the interruption to their access to JPMC's banking services, but also by the devastating impact on plaintiffs' ability to transact and access their monies, and by having to enter into less favorable business arrangements with other financial institutions. Trump also suffered extensive reputational harm by being forced to reach out to other banks to move funds and accounts, making it clear that he and his companies had been debanked by JP Morgan. Now, I want to see if this mentions, okay, now, one of the things that I think people have to keep in mind here is that some of the regulators did look into debanking, which I reported on in an episode probably about 2 months ago, where they did find that banks had acted inappropriately, and banks did perform different levels of debanking on a number of clients. Now, that has yet to be fleshed out to a certain extent. Like, in other words, they haven't, as far as I know, they have not filed charges against anyone in that report. They have not brought regulatory, penalties or anything of any kind against anybody. So that stuff may be coming. It may still be coming. We just haven't seen it yet. But obviously, after that report came out and basically said that, yeah, after looking into this, we do find a certain amount of credible evidence that there was debanking going on, and different banks doing it to different extents, different levels. That this is really no shock that Trump would come out and sue JP Morgan and Jamie Dimon. Now, here is the question, though, with this, and this is something I said from the beginning. So let's just, from a legal standpoint, right? In other words, can Trump prove this in court that they debanked him? Like, he can prove that they kicked him out, because we just saw that. They February 19th, they called him up and basically said, hey, Mr. Trump, you're gone. You got 2 months and we're booting you out, and then you're gonna have to go find another bank to deal with. So there's no defending that. They did that. They did that to him. They booted him out. Now they're gonna have to defend why they booted him out. But what they're going to fall back on, what JP Morgan and Jamie Dimon are going to fall back on, is they're going to say, listen, the regulators assessed us by these metrics, and one of those metrics that they put on there was what was it? It was a not personal risk, not reputational risk. What was it? I can't think of that. I can't think of that terminology. But it was something along those lines, where they basically said, okay, if we deem you to have clients that we believe are high risk or really concerning, we're going to ding you for that. So again, their argument's going to be that, hey, the previous administration was judging us, engaging their orders as to whether we were performing well or not based on these different factors. And so we were just following what the government was ordering us or telling us to do. And so how can we be, how can we be in trouble for that? Um, again, I think it will make for a very interesting court case, because I think again, this is one of those deals. Let's assume that they are guilty for the moment, right? Even if they are guilty, this may not be that easy to prove in a court of law. And then the other side of this is, say they're guilty, right? And you want to prevent this from happening again. Well, how do you do that? Like, how do you, okay, you could write a law. I don't think that law is going to be, I don't think it's really going to end up preventing anything from, and people would say, well, why would that be? Well, because it's like this. When Congress goes to write a law, they do not like to use matter-of-fact language. They like to use very vague language, very opaque language, very obscure type of language that leaves them, and they want to intentionally leave things open to interpretation, so that a few years down the road, if you don't like something, you could just interpret it a different way. And that's how Congress likes to do things. And so I don't have a lot of faith that Congress would be able to write some law to prevent debanking from happening in the future. So, but anyway, we'll keep an eye on that. Hey, I got an off note here, everybody. Got a comment from Kevin Hawthorne. 5257 has joined the chat conversation. Good to have you with us here tonight, Kevin. Thank you for joining. Hope you're enjoying the show so far. Okay, now on another note, as we move to another topic here. So JP Morgan's Diamond, he sees a 10.3% pay bump to $43 million. Pretty good. Not too bad, right? The bank credited longtime CEO Jamie Dimon for his longstanding exemplary leadership, commitment to shareholders, and continued development of top executives. Now, Jamie's only on a 5-year contract, and I think he might have like 4 years left in that contract. I think Jamie is going to be 70 years old here pretty soon. So I don't know if does it give Jamie's age in here? All right, so Jamie, he's 69. He's 69 right now. So he became CEO of JP Morgan at the start of 2006, and his succession plans have been a point of industry curiosity for years, so much so that he maintained a running joke with observers who would ask his expected timeline to transition out of the top role. 5 more years, he would tell analysts year after year, until at a recent investors' days, he projected a shorter timeline. So yeah, I mean, I don't think it's any secret that Jamie is reaching the end of his road here, and that my guess is that he would be stepping down here in the next year or two. And so this pay package might be something of like a parting gift of sorts, parting gift of ways from the board to basically just say, hey, thank you for being such a great CEO for the last 20 years and doing such an incredible job. And look, Jamie has not been without his controversies over the years, but you got to give the guy credit where credit is due. The guy has been an amazing CEO for JP Morgan. He has led them through some of the most difficult times, and he's turned them into the biggest, baddest bank in the world in the last 20 years. And you got to give the guy credit for that. The guy will go down as he's going to be a legend in the banking business in 50 years, 100 years. When they read about this time period, he's going to be the guy. He's going to be the guy that they're going to write about. Just like back with the original JP Morgan back at the turn of the 19th into the 20th century, when we had the panic of 1907. we had, it was JP Morgan was the guy that basically ran in and got everything under control and calmed the market down and settled it all out. So, Jamie was the guy there during the financial crisis of 07, 08, 09. He was the guy that steered them through and brought them out smelling like a rose at the end of the day. So, so again, he's got his spot in the history books. That is for sure. So you got to give the guy credit where credit is due. He has done a phenomenal job as CEO of JP Morgan. That being said, I mean, 43, I don't know about anybody else, $43 million. That's a nice pay. I wouldn't mind getting that payday. That'd be a good payday. So, all right, let's shift gears here for a second. Let's talk about the inside the explosion of banking charter applications. So pent-up demand led to at least 18 applications being filed with the OCC last year, and that influx could continue in 2026. 2 applications have been submitted to the agency in recent weeks. Now, I just did a whole episode on this, where just about a week or so ago, I did an episode on bank charters. I did an episode on de novo startup banks. I did bank IPOs coming for this year, and then talked a little bit about the overall M&A market and how much money banks were expected to make on the overall M&A market. So, again, we had this explosion of banking charters. So a lot of banking charters come in now. A lot of these banking charters were from non-banks. They were basically from fintechs, from crypto companies. So a lot of interesting players coming in here to jump in on this. So, and I just want to see here, multiple firms, including Nissan and PayPal, sought industrial loan company charters, which allowed FDIC's fully insured full-service banks to be owned by non-financial firms. At least one fintech called Checkout.com sought a merchant acquirer limited purpose bank charter from the Georgia Department of Banking and Finance. 6 de novo applications have since scored conditional charters, and as of last week, so has Checkout.com. Gould, who said the influx is a return to normal for the agency and said it signals healthy competition, a commitment to innovation, and should be encouraging to all of us. What we see now is the fintech sector finally being encouraged and welcomed into the regulatory fold, seeking the benefits of having a banking license and also being willing to meet the very high standards that go along with that privilege. The result for 2026, operations will begin for some or all of the 6 banks that receive conditional de novo charters in 2025. The OCC will decide on 2025's 12 other applicants as more charter applications, alt guesses 25, are filed. But we're just going to see more and more of this in 2026. So again, very interesting. And then to coincide with that, so the FDIC conditionally approves Ford and GM for ILC charters. So both automakers must stand up their respective banks within 12 months. After that, they must maintain a minimum 15% Tier 1 leverage ratio. Now, I would point out to everybody that here's one of the really interesting things with this. So GM, of course, had a bank years ago. They had GM Finance. And GM Finance failed miserably in the 07-08 financial crisis. And so they took a nosedive, and now, and of course, that got spun out into, what did GM get spun out into? Their, what is that called today? I don't know if it mentions that here. I don't think they mentioned that here in the article, but, it'll come back. Of course, it'll come back to me later. But anyway, I digress. So the FDIC, they approved the deposit insurance applications for Ford Motor Company and General Motors Company on Thursday, paving the way for the automakers to establish their own industrial banks. Ford Credit Bank and GM Financial Bank, which will both be chartered in Utah, will each focus on auto lending, with Ford lending through indirect retail installment and lease contracts originated by auto dealers, and GM funding through retail installment contracts from GM Financial. Ford Credit Bank's funding will mainly come from retail savings accounts and time deposits obtained via the bank's website and mobile app. And GM Financial banks will mainly come from savings accounts and time deposits via the bank's website and a mobile app. Both automakers must stand up their respective banks within 12 months. After that, they must maintain a minimum 15% Tier 1 leverage ratio. Now, let me just ask a question here on this, right? So why does anybody think that banks might have an issue with this, right? Well, it comes in the whole rationale for why how GM and Ford are going to raise their money. They are going to get it by taking deposits, mainly through savings accounts, but also through CDs. And I imagine they will probably offer some very nice rates, which again, great for consumers. I'm sure there's a lot of consumers. If they've got some primo CD rates and a great savings account rate, I'm sure there are a lot of consumers that will, move their money over there in a heartbeat and will, keep their money in there. But that could put a crimp on a lot of banks there, or force a lot of banks to keep rates much higher than they'd like to on CDs and savings accounts. Now I know a lot of people out there are like, oh, that would be so terrible for them, right? But it does have an effect, though. It does have an effect on banks' profitability, and it does. I've talked about a lot of these issues many times as far as what is called a bank's net interest margin. The concept of what's known as margin compression, how interest rates affect that. And I've talked about a lot of those things over the last couple of years. But, so we'll have to keep an eye on this and see what happens. Now, additionally to all this, this year is expected to deliver an IPO super cycle. So first up, a crypto company. So crypto firm BitGo's debut today follows a number of crypto companies that went public last year, including stablecoin issuer Circle and the Winklevoss brothers Gemini. This year is said to be a super cycle for public debuts with possible mega IPOs from the likes of Anthropic and SpaceX. This year is expected to be a big one for IPOs. A crypto company kicked things off today. Crypto custodian BitGo last night priced its initial public offering at $18. The stock opened Thursday afternoon at around $22, implying a market capitalization of more than $2 billion, using estimated total shares outstanding that kept rising. The shares are trading on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker BTGO. The upsized offering, share prices above the indicated range, as well as the warm opening reception, signaled investor enthusiasm for new listings and matches the initial buzz around last year's crypto cohort. Think companies like Circle and Gemini. That's a good sign for the conga line of companies waiting to debut this year, which includes mega IPOs from SpaceX, OpenAI, and Anthropic, some eyeing valuations that would land them in the $1 trillion club. So yes, so very interesting. Obviously, there's a lot of us out there that want to keep an eye on that. Probably want to buy some stock later this year. Just saying. I know I watch that. I always preface it. I'm not advocating for that. Not advocating for you to. I don't do the whole financial advice bit here. I'm not telling people buy this stock, buy that stock. I don't do any of that on here. I leave that up to you and your discretion. This podcast is strictly educational. Strictly educational. You learn and then you go out and do whatever it is you're going to do. Okay, so before we get into economic indicators, or I should say some of the gauges on inflation, other things that came out this week, we are going to do what I normally like to do, and that is I am going to give everybody the economic indicators of the week here, and I'm going to blow this up a little bit, see if I can get this a little bit bigger here for everybody. Hopefully that's yeah, I think that looks a little bit better for everybody there. Okay. So I'm going to give everybody the economic indicators for the week. Then I'm going to go over the episodes that I put out for this week, as I always do. And then we're going to go over some banking news before we get back to the articles here. So, okay. what do we have for this week? So economic indicators for this week on Monday, January 26th, we get durable goods orders and durable goods minus transportation. On Tuesday, January 27th, we get consumer confidence. Wednesday, January 28th, we get the FOMC interest rate decision at 2 o'clock. And then at 2:30, we get Fed Chair Powell, the press conference. So Wednesday is going to be a very big day. Thursday, January 29th, initial jobless claims, U.S. trade deficit, U.S. productivity, wholesale inventories, factory orders. And then finally, on Friday, January 30th, we get the producer price index, which was a delayed report for December, the core PPI for December, PPI year over year, core PPI year over year, Chicago business barometer. And then at 1:30, the St. Louis Fed President Alberto Musalem is going to speak. And then at 5 p.m., Fed Vice Chair for Supervision, Michelle Mickey Bowman, is going to speak on Friday. So those are all the economic indicators that we have coming out this week. And now I'm going to jump over and we're going to talk about the episodes that I put out this week. So, a lot of great reaction. A lot of great reaction on the episodes that I put out this week. I was really happy. Got a lot of positive comments. A lot of people liked what came out. So on Monday, which is Martin Luther King Day. So for Monday, I basically just put out a couple of BND Strategy Room bonus episodes that I had plucked out of the live stream that I did on January 10th. So I did basically an auto industry update and I did a real estate update. And I've been putting out those bonus clips for the last few months. And I really like them because for people that either haven't never watched the live stream, or if they don't have 2 hours to sit down and listen to something, I like to take out these little segments that are usually anywhere from probably 6 to 9 minutes. But I take these little snippets out, I put them into little episodes, and I put them out there for people. And I think for the most part, people really like that because if they may not have time to listen for 2 hours, but people generally have time to listen for 6, 7, 8 minutes. Okay. And then on Tuesday, I put out the end of America's last luxury retailer as Saks Fifth Avenue declares bankruptcy. Now, the parent company is called Saks Global, but Saks Global filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The company was saddled with a large amount of debt stemming from the purchase of Neiman Marcus, which it had funded with $2.2 billion in junk bond sales. Right after the merger with Neiman Marcus, Saks immediately began having cash flow issues. Saks stopped paying vendors. The vendors didn't send the products, and soon the lack of adequate inventory led to a drop in sales. The deterioration in sales meant that Saks was unable to make a $100 million interest payment on their debt in December. So Richard Baker, Saks Global CEO, was forced to step down, and a new team was basically brought in to lead the company through restructuring. So again, I thought very interesting article there. Saks Fifth Avenue, of course, the last major American luxury retail brand with a long storied history there. And so again, in a certain respect, it's kind of sad to see them go. But I think merging them together with Neiman Marcus at the very beginning was a bad idea. Okay, then on Wednesday, I did why did Apple's credit card partnership with Goldman Sachs fall apart? So we all saw in the news, and I reported on last week, how Goldman Sachs had sold the Apple credit card portfolio to JP Morgan Chase, but there was a little bit more behind the story. And the Wall Street Journal put out a great article covering all this, and I really thought this was great to key in on. So how did Apple's credit card partnership with Goldman Sachs completely fall apart? Well, Goldman Sachs decided to make a push into retail banking a few years ago with Marcus and with Apple, with their Apple Card portfolio. Well, that strategy really proved a failure, and Goldman decided to get out of that end of the banking business. So Marcus was closed down, their loans were sold off, and the Apple Card portfolio became the last piece. Now, that set up the setup of the Apple Card was unusual from the start, with Apple insisting on customers getting a statement at the beginning of each month. Now, that might not sound like a big deal, but it actually is, and it caused a lot of customer service issues for Goldman Sachs. So, but Apple also wanted no late fees, and more importantly, they wanted every single applicant to be approved. Now, that Okay, so you approve all the applicants. Well, what happens is Goldman ended up with an enlarged um, subprime. A big chunk of the credit card portfolio was considered subprime, meaning basically people with substandard credits, which have trouble paying their bills, have a lot of delinquency on there. So they ended up with this outsized chunk of their portfolio that was subprime, and it was not good. It was costing them a lot of money, and and again that led to a lot of issues for Goldman. So this caused Goldman to have customer service issues, a high level of delinquency, and large losses on the portfolio overall. So to get JP Morgan to purchase the portfolio, Goldman had to end up taking a $1 billion haircut and agreed to backstop a certain percentage of the portfolio from future losses. So ultimately, it could take up to 2 years to transfer the portfolio from Goldman to JP Morgan. And I don't know, is JP Morgan, are they going to are they going to do a lot of these things that Goldman was doing? Like, are they going to charge no late fees? Are they going to approve every single person that comes through the door? Is Goldman Sachs still going to be writing off loans out of this portfolio to honor their agreement with JP Morgan, 2 years from now? I don't know. I mean, it's certainly, but there were a lot of issues. I really like this episode and this story on this because there were a lot of issues behind the scenes on this. And Goldman really, they really, yeah, sometimes the moral of the story there is sometimes you got to be careful what you wish for because you just might get it. And I think that is exactly the case there. Goldman, they really wanted that Apple Card deal. And, JP Morgan, they see the gold at the end of the rainbow there. They see this massive customer base for Apple. They see getting in on Apple phones and all that, which is great. But there's a lot of stuff for the bank who's on the back end of that thing. There's a lot of issues there. So we'll have to see, what ultimately becomes of that at the end of the day. And then on Thursday, I did how the collapse of Yanda Bank sent Iran into crisis. And I thought this was a great story. So whenever you have a massive unrest in a country that threatens a current regime, you can bet before all the protests, a bank failure occurred. The situation in Iran is no different. In 2025, Yeda Bank failed due to almost $5 billion in losses on a lot of bad loans. The Iranian government rolled the bank into a state bank and printed a ton of money to cover the massive losses. Unfortunately, that never works out well. In this situation, you see all the classic mistakes. Banks fail, then central banks print money to cover it up, which causes a devaluation of the currency and rising inflation, which leads to a drop in wages, which leads to people not being able to buy food, and then chaos in the streets. There are many correlations between this example and what our own central bank has done here in the U.S. Yes, very interesting how that plays out. So, but again, I thought this was a great episode. It gave me a chance to report on a bank failure somewhere outside of the U.S. for once. I've reported on a lot of bank failures in the U.S., but this was the failure in Iran. And like I said, when you have a country, and again, when you look at a lot of smaller countries, third world countries around the world, almost invariably, when you see a collapse, there was a bank involved at the front end of that, whether it was the central bank or whether it was some banks in the country. But there always seems to be a bank at the heart of that crisis. There was some kind of bank failures. Or there was a currency collapse that led to bank failures that then led to the dominoes just falling on down the line there. So like I said, I thought that episode was really good. It was a really great take. Definitely check that out when you have a minute. So, and then on Friday, I did an episode called Supply Chain Finance, Cash Flow Strategy, Financial Engineering, or Fraud. So the collapse of auto parts supplier First Brands in 2025 has put a spotlight on the cash flow technique known as supply chain finance. This is also known as factoring receivables or collect early, pay late. So the problem with SCF is that it can distort a company's actual cash flow position. It can make cash on hand look a lot stronger by pushing off payments to vendors and moving debt to accounts payable on the balance sheet. In the case of First Brands, they took SCF to an extreme and ultimately committed fraud. For many companies in the business world that use SCF every day, it works fine if it is not abused. Everything in moderation, as the saying goes. So again, I thought this episode was really good because it gave me a chance to focus in on supply chain finance and what supply chain finance is, how a lot of companies use it, how that is basically the factoring of receivables. It's a business strategy known as collect early, pay late. In other words, you're gonna collect your money first, but then you're gonna try to pay your vendors as late as you could possibly get away with paying them, without getting into big brouhaha or without getting them really upset at you. So again, it's playing the cash flow game, but some of the issue with supply chain finance is that it can make it appear as if you've got all this cash because you're basically bringing the cash in and you're hoarding it and you're not paying your vendors. So it gives this appearance that you've got this massive amount of cash on hand when in reality you don't. So like I said, I thought it was a very just a good thing and an interesting thing to point out. So, okay. And then finally, actually earlier today, I had an episode, I had an update, part 33 of the crypto series and the battle over stablecoin regulation, crypto series part 33. In this episode, we cover the battle over stablecoin regulation as bankers and crypto firms continue to argue over the finer points of the Genius Act and the Clarity Act. On the banker side, there is a real concern that if stablecoins are allowed to pay interest, rewards, or annual yield payouts, that will cause a drain on bank deposits. On the crypto side, players like Coinbase have a legitimate complaint against bankers and the banking lobby for making the legislation in a way that only benefits them. So the other news covered included BlackRock seeing changes in retail investors' access to cryptocurrencies, and World Liberty Financial applies for a banking charter. So again, I thought it was another really good installment of the crypto series. If you have not had a chance to watch or check out any of those crypto series episodes, I highly recommend it. I cover all kinds of stuff in that crypto series. I cover the history of crypto. I cover crypto scams, crypto fraud, all these great crypto stories, crypto documentaries from Netflix. Like I said, I kind of cover everything and anything that's crypto. But I think there's a lot of entertainment, and that crypto series in particular, I really love because I've found some real gems. I think some of the best stories I have covered. Most entertaining stories I've covered have been in that crypto series. So, okay, but those were the episodes that I put out for this week. Again, as I always state, I always have new episodes that come out every Monday through Friday at premiering at noon. Episodes are usually 10 to 20 minutes in length, and I like to do it for that amount of time just to give people, it makes it easily consumable, I guess. You can look at it from that point of view. All right. Let's go on to some banking news, shall we, before we get back to our news articles here. So, the FHFA, enterprise mortgages see fewer delinquencies in October. Personal income and spending rises in October and November. Let's see here. Pending home sales drop in December. Construction spending increases in October. BCC named as ICBA's preferred service provider. ICBA announces that BCC as a new preferred service provider. BCC supports community banks in the design, evaluation, and administration of executive compensation, supplemental retirement, and bank-owned life insurance programs, also known as BOLI. BOLI is an interesting topic. I'm gonna have to cover that. I'm going to have to do an episode on BOLI, basically cover that a little bit more in depth. SEC names examinations director. Securities and Exchange Commission announced that Kevin Cassidy has been appointed director of the Division of Examinations. Congratulations to Keith Cassidy. New York Fed household spending is up in December. ICB and others request extension for comments on FDIC stablecoin rule. So again, ICBA and other groups requested an extension to the comments period for the FDIC's proposed rulemaking on the Genius Act. Industrial production capacity utilization increase in December. Builder confidence drops in January. Fed Mickey Bowman, the Fed is to focus on M&A capital requirements. Federal Reserve Vice Chair for Supervision, Michelle Mickey Bowman, said the Fed will focus on improving the mergers and acquisitions review process and assessing the appropriateness of capital requirements across the banking system. ICBA supported regulatory relief bills advanced through committee. The first one was the Financial Reporting Threshold Modernization Act, HR 1799, and the Community Bank Regulatory Tailoring Act, HR 7056. So yes, those would both be great bills, and we're going to keep an eye on those, and hopefully those will come through soon. ICBA stated that the IRS guidance on the ACRE Act will help ag loans. So ICBA said it supports favorable provisions of IRS guidance regarding the ACRE tax exclusion for interest earned on agricultural real estate loans. So yes, that would be a good thing, no doubt. Senate Ag Committee members push for more farm assistance. So Senate Agricultural Committee Chair John Boozman and Agricultural Appropriations Committee Chairman John Hooven advocated expanded aid for farmers in the upcoming funding bill. So, yep, so let's hope they do something there. ICBA and others share with White House ways to reduce the cost of home ownership. ICBA and other groups sent a letter to the National Economic Council proposing several administrative actions that could help lower the cost of home ownership while preserving safety and soundness for market participants. Yes, we'll keep an eye on that. ICBA, other groups reiterate opposition to the Durbin-Marshall in a letter to Congress. So the ICBA and other groups sent a letter to Congress reiterating strong opposition to the Credit Card Competition Act, which is also known as the Durbin-Marshall Bill, or any other expansion of the Durbin Amendment. ICBA and other groups said that any legislative initiatives to expand the power of the federal government to intervene in the credit card market would harm consumers, small businesses, and financial institutions by reducing choice, increasing costs and fraud risks, and creating economic challenges for smaller financial institutions. So, the Credit Card Competition Act, and I'll be talking more about that actually this week. I've got a regulatory update episode that I'm going to be putting out where I'm going to be talking a little bit more about this. But I would just say on that Credit Card Act right now that there are some good things in that bill. There are also some things in that bill that are highly concerning, not just for banks, but for consumers. And I don't know that the things that they are proposing make the most sense. And like I said, I know that's like very cryptic, very vague, but it would take me too long. It would take me 50 minutes to explain all this right now. So like I said, we'll save that one, keep that in back. I'm sure we'll undoubtedly be coming back to that more in the next couple of weeks, and I'll probably put out an episode just covering that to explain all that when the time is, I'll say when the time is right. Okay, FDIC establishes an Office of Supervisory Appeals. So the FDIC Board of Directors approved amendments to its guidelines for appeals, material supervisory determinations, which includes replacing its Supervision Appeals Review Committee with the Office of Supervisory Appeals. So, okay, I think that's a good move on their part. FDIC approves ICBA opposed ILC applications to Ford and GM. Yes, we talked about that a few minutes ago. Romero Rainey, community bank voice is being heard in Washington, D.C. Community banks are making a difference in the debate over digital asset policies, but ongoing engagement will be critical, said ICBA President and CEO Rebecca Romero Rainey. So, okay, so that's good. ICBA applauds OCC efforts to reform community bank licensing. In a comment letter on the OCC proposal, ICBA said it supports language in the proposal that would deem community banks with less than $30 billion in total assets that meet certain other requirements as covered institutions. for OCC licensing requirements, which would allow additional community banks to benefit from reductions in filing requirements and expedited review processes. Encouraged the OCC to quickly finalize the proposed rule so the community banks can receive this needed regulatory relief. So, okay, that is the banking news that I have for everybody tonight. So let's get back to some of our articles here. Okay, so let's jump back into Fed news here. Okay, so the Fed's main inflation gauge shows that inflation was hanging out at 2.8% in November, edging further away from the target. So the Personal Consumption Expenditure Price Index, a measure the Fed uses as its main forecasting tool, showed inflation at 2.8% for the month, both for headline and core in November. The readings were in line with market expectations, but showed inflation still above the central bank's 2% target. Now, I don't like the way that CNBC reported on this. I felt that this was very disingenuous, the way that they reported on this. So you might notice something here, that the Fed's inflation gauge for what? For November. We're in what? January. This information was basically 2 months stale. And of course, it was going to be somewhat higher in November. It was going to be at that 2.7, 2.8% mark in November. It has, I believe that that number has improved, and that number has come down a little bit here over the last 2 months. And now, why do I say that? Well, okay, I'm going to show you this from Truflation here, and I'm going to try to blow this up a little bit. So this is from Truflation. Both our independent inflation metrics are below 2% targets. The CPA today is at 1.56%. The US PCE, which is the preferred inflation index of the Fed, is down to 1.78%. What are both of those numbers at? They are below 2%. They are below the 2% target. So where the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS, aggregates 60 to 80,000 consumer and merchant surveys that need to be analyzed by government employees, Truflation automatically pulls and calculates daily inflation indexes using over 35 million sell prices from multiple data providers. And it says here, breaking. U.S. inflation index has dropped to 1.56%, even though the official data still says 2.7%. Now, why does it say that? Well, because the data was from back in November. So again, I do believe that our inflation is improving. You see it by looking at things like Truflation here, which are giving us these readings, which I think are very good. And so I think that inflation actually is heading in the right direction. So okay, so enough on that. And obviously, we're going to get some more inflation data this week. Mortgage refinances surged again, but rates are now suddenly jumping higher. And so mortgage refinancing jumped sharply higher for the second straight week as interest rates fell further. But that boom may be about to bust. Interest rates are now moving much higher. So last week, applications to refinance a home loan rose 20%. Compared with the previous week, according to the Mortgage Bankers Association's seasonally adjusted index. Applications were 183% higher than the same week 1 year ago. So mortgage rates on conforming loans decreased to 6.16% from 6.18%, with points falling to 0.54 from 0.56. But there is a but there. Rates basically began to jump back up. And why did rates begin to jump back up just a tad? Well, because of what we had talked about at the beginning of the night here, when we talked about the 10-year T-bill and the 10-year T-bill jumping up to 4.23%. So that has had an effect on mortgage rates, obviously increasing mortgage rates back up. So again, I don't think not a drastic jump in interest rates, but enough to make a difference. I mean, we were down to 6.06%. Now we're kind of back up to 6.16%. So we're back up to where we were probably a couple weeks prior. Still not horrific by any stretch of the imagination, but we'd like to see it a little bit better. Now, again, going back to the U.S. economy, So the U.S. economy delivers 4.4% growth, outperforming forecasts. So upward revisions to exports and investments contributed to the highest adjustment to third quarter growth. So again, our GDP, the U.S. economy grew more strongly in the third quarter than initially estimated, driven by solid consumer spending and a pickup in exports. So real gross domestic product, GDP, rose at an annual rate of 4.4% during the July-September period, according to new data from the Bureau of Economic Analysis. And this represented a 0.1% point upward revision from the initial estimate. The Bureau noted the adjustment reflects upward changes to exports and investments, which helped offset the tepid downward revision to consumer spending. Real consumer spending advanced by 3.5%, up from the 2.5% registered in the second quarter. Exports also contributed to GDP growth because they account for goods and services produced domestically and sold abroad, soared by 9.6%. Imports fell by 4.4%, following a more than 29% decline in the second quarter. So again, exports jumping by 9.6%. That is fantastic. That goes back to, again, what did we look at there? Again, this goes back to the charts that we looked at with Trump here earlier. Again, trade deficit going down, obviously because we are exporting more, which is great. And that's where, that's really where we want to be here with this. So, all right. And then obviously the bullish forecast for the fourth quarter with perhaps a 5.4% expansion in GDP in the fourth quarter. So, but we'll keep an eye on that. We'll see what happens there. So now, okay. Big story here this week. Obviously, private credit. I have talked a lot about the private credit market over the last 4 or 5 months. A number of episodes on the private credit, the meltdown in the subprime auto market, part of the private credit industry. Now, we've got some very mixed things going on here. So Wall Street braced for a private credit meltdown. The risk of one is rising. Now, I've been warning of this. I've been warning of this for well over a year, that we are going to see this meltdown of sorts in the private credit market. So the private credit has surged in popularity since the post-financial crisis regulations discouraged banks from servicing riskier borrowers. Yeah, that's partially true, but the Federal Reserve basically, propping up that market, creating that private credit market by the Fed's actions. That was the bigger thing that led to the creation and growth of the private credit market. If you don't believe me, go see my Lords of Easy Money series. JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon warned after a pair of private credit-backed companies declared bankruptcy that problems in credit are rarely isolated. Companies that are most likely are most linked to the asset class, such as Blue Owl Capital, as well as an alternative asset giants Blackstone and KKR, are trading well below their recent highs. So, and then we go on here. No fear of cockroaches? Question. Private credit funds raise billions as investors look past the warnings. So troubles at First Brands Group last September stoked concerns about the private credit market. Despite the warnings, capital has continued to flow into private credit funds. TPG in December closed more than $6 billion for its third flagship credit solutions fund. Neuberger Berman recently announced the final close of its fifth flagship private debt fund at $7.3 billion. So now keep in mind here for a second here, because we're going to go to, I want to look at this now. Private credit investors are cashing out in droves. Redemptions by individual investors in funds soared at the end of 2025 after performance declined, reviving questions about suitability. So we're getting very mixed signals here. We went from Wall Street is bracing for a private credit meltdown, the risk of one is rising, to fear of cockroaches. No, not really. Private credit funds raise billions as investors look past the warnings. And then we get to private credit investors are cashing out in droves. So like, what is it? Is the private credit market, are they doing great and raising all this money? Are people diving out of it? Wall Street's bracing for a major deterioration in credit quality on a lot of loans. So, but let's read this for a second here. So for the first time since the start of the private credit boom, Large numbers of individual investors are trying to get their money out. Several of the biggest funds eligible to wealthy individuals received requests from about 5% of shareholders to cash out at the end of last year, well above the normal volume, according to Securities and Exchange Commission filings. One managed by Blue Owl got redemptions for about 15% of its shares, primarily from Asian clients, a person familiar with the matter said. The rising redemptions come at an awkward time for private credit fund managers and for the Trump administration as they push for new rules that would democratize private markets by encouraging their inclusion in 401k retirement plans for all Americans. Private fund managers, including Apollo Global Management, Blackstone, and Blue Owl, blame fear-mongering about a recent spat of corporate bankruptcies like automotive supplier First Brands for the surge of withdrawals. Analysts say there could be a similar explanation. Individual investors are falling into a familiar pattern of selling out when an asset class underperforms expectations. These investors get really surprised when their dividends go down, said Robert Dodd, an analyst at Raymond James who covers business development companies, or BDCs, the private credit funds most heavily marketed to individual investors. So again, it's almost kind of comical that they want individual investors to buy their their loans. They want them to buy this stuff, but yet when they sell it to them, and of course, individual investors are who they are. They panic. They get out of stuff real quick, and so when they start acting like that, then they get all upset about it. Like, they can't. How can that be? How can that be? How can they do this? How can they do this to us? How can they leave us? So again, it's just a very interesting thing. But what, again, so these funds here are under a lot of pressure. I think some of the real rationale is being very obscured here. I mean, they're trying to place this on nonsense about, like, oh well, they want to make it so that people can invest in this stuff in their 401ks or whatever. Well, that doesn't have anything to do whatsoever with the issues in the private credit market itself. The private credit market itself is having issues because they've made bad loans, and they, in their endless thirst to what I call feed the beast. You create the beast, but then you got to feed the beast. So in their efforts to feed the beast, what do? They start, reducing underwriting practices. They basically loosen the underwriting and start doing a lot of loans that they normally would not do, or people would not do, and then that basically puts in a lot of what's called embedded risk into the credit portfolio, as it were. And sooner or later, that's a toxic recipe. Sooner or later, that's gonna blow up in your face. I've been around banking long enough. I've seen enough to know that that's exactly how that plays out. And then finally, this was an op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal. It's called "Private Credit Takes the Pressure Off of Regular Banks." And I thought that this was really interesting. Willing investors avoid the mismatch between liquidity loans and deposits payable on demand. So I wanted to go down here. All right, let me just read this one paragraph to everybody. If I I want to make sure I was getting the right paragraph here. Okay, this reallocation has reshaped financial intermediation. Banks are increasingly in the moving business, originating, structuring, and distributing loans, while private credit funds are in the storage business, underwriting and managing illiquid assets through full cycles. Banks earn fees by facilitating the flow of capital. Private lenders earn returns by bearing risk over time. Now, that is a very interesting way to look at that. That banks are in the moving business, whereas private credit funds are in the storage business. The problem is, there's a couple problems with that. Number one is, the banks are in the moving business, but banks are also in the storage business as well. Banks have to be in the storage business because you can't grow your balance sheet if you're not adding to the number of loans that you have outstanding. You have to build the number of loans that you have outstanding, the number of loans on your balance sheet, because you have every loan portfolio has what's called runoff. You're going to have a certain percentage of runoff every year. What creates runoff? Well, people just paying down their loans. If you have a 30-year mortgage, fully amortizing loan, that means as you pay it down, the balance is going to go down until you get to zero, until it's paid off. So every year that loan is going to continue, even though the bank's making interest off of it, the loan balance is going to go down, 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 down until it goes away. So that is runoff. So you're going to have X percentage of runoff just on people paying loans down, but you're also going to have runoff in people paying loans off. So you're going to have X percentage of runoff every year. So you have to add new loans. You have to put new loans on there in order to keep building, keep growing the overall loan portfolio. So banks are also in the storage business. The idea that they're like not somehow in that. The other thing I would point out here is that this sounds an awful lot like the 07-08 financial crisis, doesn't it? Because what was happening during the 07-08 financial crisis? Well, banks were in the moving business, and banks were originating, structuring, and then distributing loans. But who were they selling them off to? Oh, they were selling them off to all kinds of investors who were buying those loans up and then repackaging them into tranches and selling them off to somebody else. And that sounds an awful lot like what was happening during the 07-08 financial crisis. So that should worry, that should give everybody a little bit of pause and a little bit of worry. Like, maybe that's not such a great idea. So again, this gentleman I just thought like had an interesting take here, and he finishes up by saying that private credit isn't without risk. A severe downturn will test underwriting standards, valuations, and investor discipline. Yes, just like I have said and have been saying. What is the first thing he says here? The underwriting standards, valuations, investor discipline. Yes, all those things will be tested. Losses will occur and some strategies will fail, but that's the point. Risk belongs with capital designed to absorb it, not with institutions whose stability depends on confidence and public support. I don't agree with that at all. Private credit doesn't replace traditional banking. It enables safer banking by allowing banks to operate under tighter regulation without starving the real economy of capital. The result isn't less risk, but better placed risk. Short duration liquidity is provided by banks built on depositor confidence, while loss is absorbed by capital built to endure it. I think that is completely misguided. Completely misguided. Because at the end of the day, if all these loans in these private companies, let me ask you a question. Who are the companies that are involved in all this private credit funding? We already named them. It is the biggest of the biggest private equity funds. It is Blue Owl Capital. It's Blackstone. It's KKR. Some of the biggest names in private equity hedge funds on Wall Street. With these companies go bust, who do you think they're going to go to? They're going to immediately run to the Federal Reserve and they're going to say, we need a bailout. We need a bailout. Okay. But the Federal Reserve is going to say, oh, well, you're not banks. And then you know what they're going to say? They're going to say, okay, if you don't find a way to bail us out, we are going to wait for it. We're going to take down all these banks with us, okay? Because all of these banks lend us money in order to be able to make a lot of these loans to the people that borrow from us, okay? So our loans are going to go bad. That's going to hit the credit quality, and that's going to take down some banks. So you see how the merry-go-round here, okay? So all of that stuff that guy just said about how this is good because it's going to make the bank safer and it places the risk where it should be. Like, no. The risk should be on the banks, and the banks should be making and underwriting and developing prudent loans. As a very wise CEO that I worked for a long time used to say to me all the time, nothing sinks a bank faster than bad loans. You have to have good loans. Strong credit underwriting, strong credit quality. That is the name of the game. Okay, let's take a look at a few other things here real quick. So silver. The silver market hit a record $100 amid red hot metals market. Gold, copper, palladium, and platinum also registered massive gains on January 28th. So this is crazy. 5 reasons gold is surging toward $5,000 an ounce. Buying the precious metal has become the antidote for market jitters. So you can see here the chart here. Over the last 5 years, I mean, gold has just exploded. We've gone from about $2,000 an ounce of gold to, again, almost $5,000 here. I mean, this is incredible. And let's look at a chart here of the live gold price. So gold, again, $4,985.80 for an ounce of gold right now. I mean, this is just incredible. It's getting ready to hit that 5,000 mark. Now let's go to silver. Let's take a look at silver. Silver over $100, $103.23. I mean, that is amazing. And I talked about this a little last week. I mean, silver was at $50 just on November 25th. Silver was hanging out at $50. And now it is it's just amazing what has happened here, this doubling in the last 2 months. It is absolutely on fire, and this is something that we will definitely have to keep an eye on. Now, here is another interesting thing. So as prediction markets grow in popularity, some fear insider trading. So what's next? So event contracts are viewed as information, but also assets, making it all the more difficult to figure out which rules do and do not apply to them. Prediction markets are regulated by the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, whose Eddie Murphy rule is aimed at preventing misappropriation of confidential information for unfair gain, but a busy run of regulatory debate seems likely. So, yeah, I think there's going to be a whole interesting conversation here around prediction markets and what they're doing, how they're doing it, how people are betting on it versus gambling. I think that line between investing, trading, gambling is really blurred here in these prediction markets. You even have Susquehanna, which is a huge hedge fund. So they've got, this says, this dream sports betting job comes with one little catch. So Susquehanna already has around 60 traders focused on prediction markets and wants to hire more. So, so it sounds like the perfect job. Work for a trading firm owned by an influential billionaire, where a requirement is to watch sports all day and use prediction markets to bet on the outcome. There's just one problem. They talk about compensation, but Susquehanna International Group, again, major player. While the basically, financial firms are in the early stages of figuring out how they can make money using prediction markets such as Kalshi and Polymarket that have exploded in popularity. The relatively low salaries being offered would be efforts to reflect that. But anyway, Susquehanna, founded by Jeff Yass, was an early entrant into prediction markets and is a part owner of Kalshi. It already has a team of around 60 traders who both buy and sell positions to keep markets liquid and trade on prediction market platforms. So again, very, very interesting here. But but are they gamblers or are they traders? I think that's a legitimate question here. I think what you're really doing is gambling. I don't think this is really trading. I think this is gambling. Again, so this is interesting stuff happening here with these betting with these not betting markets, but these prediction markets. And don't forget, Coinbase, remember I reported a couple weeks ago that Coinbase basically said that they wanted to become, the all, financial app. And one of the things that they wanted to get into or add on to was they wanted to create, I guess, their own prediction markets. Robinhood getting in on the prediction markets game. So everybody seems to be jumping in on this, which is very, 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 very interesting here. So, All right, and then just a couple more things here real quick tonight. So Wall Street firms got restricted from buying single-family homes under Trump's new administrative order. You gotta love this. Titled "Stopping Wall Street from Competing with Main Street Home Buyers," the order aims to preserve the supply of single-family homes. So President Donald Trump is attempting to breathe life back into the American dream of owning a home with an executive order signed on Tuesday. Titled "Stopping Wall Street from Competing with Main Street Home Buyers," the order aims to put single-family homes back into reach for prospective home buyers, especially first-time home buyers. Trump blamed Wall Street investors and the previous administration for pricing out families. Yes, so this again, I love this. I think this is great. I'm super happy that he did this. And I think that will really help, stopping them from going in and just buying up single family homes left and right and then renting them out. This will be a good thing. However, there's some other wrinkles here. So now, Trump is rejecting this proposal to let home buyers use the 401k funds for down payment. The president says he is not a huge fan of the idea, as retirement funds perform better than home values. Yes and no. Yes and no. But, again, I share some of the same concerns. Last week I talked about this, and I shared some of the same concerns, and that is, the power of compounding, right? You take that money out of your 401k. Like I said, I don't believe you should ever take the money out of your 401k because it's going to hurt your ability to compound that money and really grow it over time. However, that being said, if you have the money there and you can use it to get yourself into a house, that's also going to help you financially over time, because now you're going to have the equity in the house and the equity and your 401k growing together over time. And that growth of real estate and the market together are what gives a lot of people wealth at the end of the day. So, again, I wasn't totally loving it, but if they were going to allow people to use the money, especially pull the money out penalty free and tax free, if they were going to do that, I thought that, yeah, you know what, that might just be a winning strategy. Now, but there's something else at play here. Obviously, the boys on Wall Street didn't like this. The boys on Wall Street are like, oh my gosh, we can't have people pulling, hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe billions of dollars out of their 401ks to go buy real estate. We can't have that. That's really going to hurt our market returns at the end of the day. So I'm sure a lot of people called the president up real quick and said, ho, wait, don't do this, no, don't do that. That's really going to hurt our returns. It might even hurt the stock market a little bit, at least in the short run, if people are running in to pull out a bunch of their money out of 401ks to go buy real estate. So again, yeah, it adds to some very interesting, wrinkles there. And so here's another thing here: to make homes affordable again, someone has to lose out. So young Americans need home prices to fall. Existing owners don't want to take a hit. So you're left in this situation. Trapped renters want home prices to fall so they can finally get onto the property ladder. Millions of existing owners want values to stay high. These and other conflicting interests make it hard for policymakers to give young Americans a leg up in a brutal housing market. President Trump is heating anger about housing affordability ahead of the midterm elections, and the administration has been drip feeding ideas about how to tackle the issue. The 50-year mortgage, tap your 401k, buying bonds to try to keep interest rates down. So yeah, they've been floating and looking at a whole bunch of different ideas here, but it is a very it is threading the needle, to be sure, because again, yeah, you don't want housing values to crash or go down to a point where it hurts a lot of homeowners, where a lot of homeowners are like, man, I was feeling great and now I feel this is terrible. But at the same time, affordability is a major issue, and younger people need to be able to buy affordable houses. They need affordable houses and to get rolling, because that is the American dream at the end of the day. So it's a very, again, you see here the president and administration really trying to thread a needle here between, do you do things that really cause home values to come down to make them more affordable. But again, one way or the other, you're risking voting blocks, right? It gets very tricky. It gets very tricky. So, all right. This was kind of interesting. Trump kicks BRICS out of America. So the underlying reason for Trump's neo-Monroe doctrine has to do with preserving dollars and the U.S. supremacy in the world. So yeah, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time, but I just want to hit some of the highlights of this. You know, the rise of de-dollarization, BRICS, geopolitics, gold, and a potential currency challenge, Trump's neo-Monroe doctrine, tariffs as dollar defense, and then dollar supremacy, oil and U.S. strategic power, trade, savings, innovation, and the dollar's role, military power, financial leverage, dollar and U.S. supremacy, a core of neo-Monroe doctrine. So yes, I mean, the BRICS are a threat to the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency. No, believe me, nobody should want the U.S. If the day comes that the U.S. ever loses the reserve currency of the world, it's going to be the worst day in all of our lives, because that means the market will be in the dump. Our economy will be in tatters. That is like Armageddon. That would be horrible, horrible. There are 7 or 8 countries that have been able to claim that title of having the world reserve currency. And for every single one of them, once they lost it, they never got it back. So again, we do not want to see that. We do not want to see that. Definitely not in our lifetimes. That is for sure. So okay. Trump on Ottawa, or Canada's China deal. China will eat them alive. Yeah, you better believe it. I think that Canada just can't stop doing stupid things right now. Capital One nabs Brex for $5.15 billion. The deal expected to close in mid-2026 lets the bank absorb a fintech player that specializes in corporate cards, payments, and expense management tools. So we'll keep an eye on that one and see how it works out. Goldman Sachs grapples with top lawyer's Epstein problem. A key executive told others he was formulating a contingency plan for Catherine Rummler to leave the Wall Street giant. New disclosures on relationship with sex offender sparked internal review. So again, I said this a couple months back when the news came out. This woman, major problem for Goldman Sachs. Her problem with her relationship with Jeffrey Epstein stems for a long time and goes very deep. This woman was also highly politically connected. She was considered Obama's fixer during the Obama years. So this woman has her hand in a lot of dirty, dirty stuff. And I said that from the beginning when this news came out. I said Goldman Sachs is going to have a real hot potato with this one. And I'm sure that they are looking for a way to boot her out the door. But they probably have to do it in such a way that she is not going to come back and sue them. So again, I wouldn't want to be Goldman Sachs with that one. That's going to be a tough one for them. So, and then finally, last article I have for everybody tonight. So move over 60-40 portfolio. The 50-30-20 strategy and AI investing are taking over. So the 60-40 portfolio no longer reflects modern market dynamics. A better model is called the 50-30-20 portfolio that balances equity, bonds, and alternatives. AI-powered investing may help investors manage complexity and improve performance. So again, very interesting there. So let's say inside the 50-30-20 model, so with a 50-30-20 investment strategy, an investor divides their portfolio across 3 broad asset categories. 50% in equities, so stocks, whether individually or in funds for growth potential, 30% in bonds, so fixed income securities, singly or in funds, 20% alternatives, so individually or in funds to provide diversification and non-correlated returns. This can include commodities, hedge funds, private equity, and real estate. So yes, I think that I think there's a whole lot of sense there around that strategy there for how you should be investing your bond portfolio. I will tell people something that having a dividend paying portfolio, okay, dividends are cash flow. Again, I know, equities are great. Having the Magnificent Seven stocks are great. The stock price goes up. They have that appreciation. But the only way for you to get that is to sell it. Okay. You in order to capture the appreciation, you have to sell the stock. And when you sell the stock, you incur taxes, you incur capital gains. Um, and again, if you just have a simple portfolio where maybe this is just some side money you have, whatever, but you have a simple portfolio where you just invest money in dividend paying stocks and you just let that thing roll, man. Just let it roll. Just leave it there. You get those dividends that come in every quarter. And then every once in a while, you get some special dividends. You get some capital gains. And you just let that money reinvest. You just keep plowing it in. And it's like a snowball. It just rolls and rolls and rolls and rolls. And you'd be amazed at after 10, 20, 30, 40 years, how much money you have there at the end of the day. So, and again, I always end with the caveat, I'm not a financial advisor. But go talk to your financial advisor. Go talk to your financial advisor. Ask them about some of these strategies. They will tell you. And I think they would agree with some of my assessments. I'll put it that way. So, all right, guys, that's what I got for you tonight. Let's go to our wrap-up mode here. I got to jump into just items that I like to cover here at the end of the live stream. So, and let me look for my banners here real quick. Where are my banners at? Okay. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, please leave me some reviews. Really need some reviews. Reviews would really help the channel, really help the podcast. Leave some positive reviews on there. I would greatly appreciate it. Make sure to visit the website, thebankernextdoor.com. Have a lot of great things up there on the website. Go check that out, please. If you make sure to subscribe on YouTube for the latest news and announcement via posts. I usually put out at least a couple of posts every week. I like to put out a post on Sunday detailing out, hey, these are all the episodes I have coming out this week, Monday through Friday. Here's what's coming out. I also like to post on, what I'm going to be covering on Strategy Room every week. And if there's some change to the timing of Strategy Room, if I have to move to Friday night or something like that. So make sure to subscribe on YouTube to get all the latest and greatest through a lot of the posts that I put out. You can send comments and questions to me at info@thebankernextdoor.com. So if you have any recommendations on topics that you'd like me to cover, if you have any questions about the things I've covered, please feel free to email me at info@thebankernextdoor.com. You can follow me on social media on Getter, X, and Truth Social. I will tell you, I spend the most time probably on X, so you can follow me there. And like I said, comment on anything, whatever you like, whatever floats your boat, right? Remember, BND, the Banker Next Door, Strategy Room. We are on YouTube, Rumble, and all major podcast platforms. New episodes come out every Monday through Friday at 12 noon. Be sure to check those out. And the BND Strategy Room live stream is every night here on YouTube, or not every night, I'm sorry, every Saturday night live at 8 o'clock here on YouTube, right? Okay, keep an eye out. Over the next couple of weeks, or not next couple of weeks, the next couple of months, I should say, I am going to be doing some special live streams. I have some special reports that I'm going to be putting out. I'm going to be covering China. We're going to be covering AI. We're going to be covering crypto. We're going to be covering healthcare, which is a big one. Healthcare is a big one, near and dear to my heart. I'll be doing some stuff on personal finance. And then maybe a couple with extra news. I've got a lot of stuff that, believe it or not, I don't get to. I literally have so much stuff I could probably do a 5-hour podcast every week, but I try to keep it to about 2 hours. But I get a lot of extra news, a lot of extra stuff. So I might do like just a couple extra live streams, just with some extra news, data, information that I think is good that I love to share. So keep an eye out for that. And all right, and then let's do our story of the week and our quote of the week. So let's go. So last week I did Treasury yield as the story of the week. This week I'm doing the yield curve. So a yield curve is a line that plots the yields, interest rates, of bonds having equal credit quality but differing maturity dates. The slope of the yield curve gives an idea of future interest rate changes and economic activity. There are three main types of yield curve shapes. There is normal, which is an upward sloping curve. There is inverted, which is a downward sloping curve. And there is flat or flattening. A yield curve is used as a benchmark for other debt in the market, such as mortgage rates or bank lending rates. It is used to predict changes in economic output and growth. The most frequently reported yield curve compares the 3-month, the 2-year, the 5-year, the 10-year, and the 30-year U.S. Treasury debt. A normal yield curve is one in which longer maturity bonds have a higher yield compared to short-term bonds due to the risks associated with time. However, in a rising interest rate period, this has the effect of altering the normal shape of the curve by increasing the yield on shorter term issues, as investors' expectations of higher rates and lower economic output have forced down short-term bond prices. If yield increases on short-term U.S. Treasury bonds persist, the yield curve could potentially invert, which could be a harbinger of an economic recession. And yes, these were all things that we saw over the last 3-4 years. I've talked a lot about the yield curve, the slope of the yield curve. We went through one of the longest yield curve inversions in the history of our country during the Biden administration in the last few years. But coming into the Trump administration here, the yield curve has reverted into positive territory. We now have a sloping yield curve where the long end of the bond, the 30-year, obviously much higher than the 10 or the 2-year right now. So that's where we want to be. That's at a good spot. So that is yield curve. So I spend a lot of time talking about and covering the yield curve and interest rates because it is so critically important to understanding what is going on with the economy and where the economy could potentially be heading. So, okay, that being said, okay, now our quote of the week. So this comes from John Milton from the very famous poem Paradise Lost. And this goes, "The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell and a hell of heaven." So that's a great line. I think it's a very deep line. Think about that for a minute. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell and a hell of heaven. So it gets kind of deep. You got to think about that one a little bit there. But Paradise Lost, if you've never read that, I highly recommend it. I also Gustave Doré was the famous painter and artist who did the kind of illustrated Paradise Lost. So if you've never had a chance to look at those, I highly recommend checking them out. They were something that absolutely caught my imagination as a kid and as a young teenager. The artistry of Gustave Doré and the certain passages in Paradise Lost really captured my imagination. So if you haven't had a chance to go look at that, I highly recommend it. Definitely go check that out. So, but with that being said, I will wrap up by just saying thank you, everybody, for hanging out with me for a couple hours here again on Saturday night, as everybody usually does. If you haven't checked out any other content on the channel, please do so. I really think I've got a lot of great stuff up there right now, getting just a tremendous amount of feedback. I hit some great measurements. Oh, you know what? I almost forgot. I got one thing. Hang with me for a second. I got one thing I got to share with everybody. I almost forgot this. I forgot it the last couple of weeks, and I almost forgot it again this week. So, can I find, hold on, let me see if I can. Okay, let's bring that up there. And there we go. Okay. All right. Let me put this up here. Okay. All right. So I got this awards from Spotify. This was very unexpected, but I got honored in earlier this month, at the beginning of January. I got the 2025 Rising Star, a 2025 marathon show, meaning a lot of people listened to it for a long period of time, and I got a 2025 talked about show from Spotify. So this was, again, I had no idea this stuff was coming. Very unexpected, but very cool. I was very flattered to get these things, but very happy to have them. And I'm so happy that so many people on Spotify are listening to me and really finding the podcast, just really liking it. Which is great. That was the whole goal. It's the whole idea. So again, just wanted to share that with everybody. I thought that was pretty cool, getting some honors there. I also the podcast went over 20,000 downloads and over 100,000 views on YouTube. It was great. Again, I know those numbers may not seem all that big, but I think for somebody who just does this in his spare time as my side hustle on as it were, I think those are some pretty solid numbers. Again, after only having been doing this for 2 years, I thought those were pretty cool. I thought those are some pretty cool milestones there. So, but anyway, with that being said, like I said, I thank everybody for listening. I thank everybody for spending the time to hang out with me. And I hope to see everybody again real soon. So be careful out there. If you're in one of the states like me, like I am, that's getting hit with this huge snowstorm tonight and tomorrow, just be safe out there. And like I said, I will be back next Saturday for another edition of Strategy Room. So be safe out there. Have a good weekend. Enjoy the NFC and AFC championship games tomorrow night. And I will see everybody next week. So thank you so much.